So welcome everyone to this session, information session about the new Transforming Energy Together programme. We've got about an hour together this morning. As the first half of the session, we've got some slides and we're going to be giving you some information about the programme and what it looks like and the criteria and the application process. Then we've got a good chunk of time for questions and answers and a bit of discussion. Then we'll wrap up at the end with some information on next steps if you are interested in applying to the programme. So we'll have time to cover all of the questions that you've got this morning. So I will kick off by saying a little bit about Transforming Energy Together programme. So the programme, I suppose, has come out of, in a way, the Community Climate Action Programme, and how that's really centred the critical importance of communities when it comes to the city's transition to net zero, and doing that in a just and a fair way. It's a new programme. I think it's really important to sort of share that it's a new programme in the city, and that means we don't have all of the answers. So in the Q&A session later, we're going to be actively listening. There might be things that we're not able to give an immediate response to because there's going to be an element of co-development, but we will get back to you on those queries later. So what is Transforming Energy Together? It's an opportunity for 3 community organisations in Bristol to each receive up to £100,000 of funding to help support them with 3 things, really: sort of identifying local climate priorities with a particular focus on energy and homes, build strategic support around those priorities, and then develop a tangible and investable project plan that's based upon those priorities. Transforming Energy Together is part of a bigger Bristol-wide, and actually going beyond Bristol into the West of England programme that has just kicked off, which is called Mission Net Zero. And it's an Innovate UK funded programme at one of 7 places across the UK through the Net Zero Communities programme. And the aims of the whole project overall in Bristol: first of all, support 3 Bristol communities, which is obviously the Transforming Energy Together element. Secondly, to build support for climate action through an investment plan for the city and the wider region. And then also there's a strand of work around supporting small businesses and green skills and jobs. So people wanting to work on these climate projects and creating jobs and training for them. So Transforming Energy Together sits within this wider Mission Net Zero project that has got a lot of different partners in. So who's involved in this particular strand, Transforming Energy Together? So key partners, first of all, Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership, who I'm representing today. And if that name is slightly unfamiliar, that's because only recently we rebranded. So we were formerly Bristol Green Capital Partnership. And we are supporting the recruitment of the 3 communities because of our close links with Community Climate Action in the city. And then we're going to be supporting a kind of wider comms engagement and learning programme around this. Centre for Sustainable Energy, who are going to be running the core part of the programme and supporting those 3 communities that are selected. Bristol Energy Network, who through their Energy Academy are going to be providing some extra support and opportunities around surveys and champions, and Bristol City Council, who are a core partner. So their role is in all aspects, but particularly linking in with the wider Bristol Mission Net Zero project. And as I mentioned, the programme is supported by Innovate UK. So we think this is hopefully a useful and quite a unique offer. So it's particularly targeted at place-based communities to enable them to get funding for a part of the process which is often quite tricky to get funding for, because often people want the project idea ready to roll, to be invested in, but this is to support the early stages of the process. So developing a community priority, an idea or a need into a feasible business case that's ready for investment. And some of the key features of it is a tailored support programme for those 3 selected communities from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. As I said, up to £100,000 to support staff time, and that's new existing staff potentially, or new staff that you might want to bring in, and also for engagement with community. And the timescale in terms of what that budget covers over time is running from June of this year through to October 2025, which is the end of the whole project in the city. And so what's the focus of it? We really want Transforming Energy Together to be focused on community priorities that relate to how to generate clean energy locally, and also how to reduce energy use in homes and neighbourhoods. And the plans that are created through the programme are sort of doing 3 things, really. They are responding specifically to local community wants and needs. They're going to be aligning with strategic local priorities, and ultimately plans that are investable. So connecting with the finance sector to make sure that the plans are developed are likely to be invested in and have been researched to be feasible. And just before we jump into a bit more detail about the programme, I thought it'd be useful just to share a little bit about eligibility to apply for this. So it's, yeah, hopefully most of you may have read this if you've had a look at the information pack already. Hopefully not too complicated. You need to be a constituted group, so have a governance structure and an organisational bank account. You need to be a geographic community, so based in the Bristol City Council boundary, and you need to be representing a neighbourhood of Bristol that's larger than an individual street. You need to be working and actively engaged with your local community and have good, positive links with other organisations and groups within your community. And either have some form of existing community plan, community climate action plan, or community energy plan. It can either be that, or be able to evidence previous activity working with your community and doing some engagement around energy and climate priorities and solutions. And I'm going to come back a little bit later to talk a little bit more about the application process, but now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Harriet, who is going to share a little bit more about the programme. Over to you, Harriet, and just give me a nod if you want me to drive slides.
Great. Yeah, so I'm just going to go over what the offer is from CSE, and there'll be more chance in the Q&A session to kind of query or interrogate this a bit more, but just to try not to repeat too much of what Amy said in terms of the broader context, but just to remind us that this broader project, the Bristol Mission Net Zero project, is about how we can bring more investment into Bristol to meet our net zero targets, and Bristol City Leap has been the kind of first phase of that, which has been around kind of council assets, but this next stage is really how we can get funding in to kind of support communities and households to make changes to support our net zero transition. And just a point in terms of when we're talking about investment, this is the process by which money is helping kind of to make objectives a reality. So when we invest, we decide on what becomes part of our future. And in terms of kind of place-based communities and neighbourhoods, it's really, really critical that communities are actually involved as much as possible in that process of deciding where are we investing, and making sure that investment aligns with what community needs and priorities are. So that's what Transforming Energy Together is kind of trying to do and hopes to do, on a kind of, I suppose there's a bit of a journey that the chosen communities will be on with all of the partners on this programme. We'll all be learning and exploring together, but that the overall aim, if you like, is to ensure that community needs and priorities around that kind of have a relationship to our net zero and climate ambitions are able to be realised. Oh, next slide, please, Amy. As Amy's already said, there is a focus, an energy focus for this project, which is kind of in the title. But we recognise that a lot of community priorities won't necessarily be energy priorities. So we are also kind of, we will look to opportunities to see how other priorities, which might be around, for example, improving your parks and green spaces, how some of those other priorities could be interwoven within project ideas and investment opportunities. But yeah, the primary focus is around energy. So just to kind of repeat that. And obviously the type of projects will really vary depending on the communities that are involved, and of course what's technically feasible in your area and what other Bristol-wide schemes are happening, which might make things possible or not possible. So I've included some examples, not to kind of restrict what you see as possible, but just to start to try and put a bit of fruit on this quite broad kind of broad project idea. So examples could be street or neighbourhood scale retrofit projects, rooftop solar, but on a kind of street by street basis rather than individual houses. And then maybe a kind of slightly a step up in terms of innovation, grants looking at, for example, low carbon heating options, but on a street scale, which has been done in a few parts of the UK. So it really depends what the community is, what their ambitions and needs are, as well as what's technically feasible in that area. And of course, as you're probably all aware, community energy projects bring with them a kind of range of benefits, which obviously there's about reducing our carbon emissions, but what we're really interested in is meeting those community needs and priorities around reducing energy bills, increasing kind of local energy resilience, having warmer homes, just greater energy literacy and empowerment. So yeah, next slide please, Amy. Thank you. And there are three phases, if you like, of the journey. And the first one is what we've called the action learning phase. So that will run from June to October of this year. And the action learning phase is a kind of process of working together to learn new skills, understand what might be possible in your community, engaging with your community. So there'll be this phase, there'll be quite kind of regular, we've called them touch-in points. We don't want to be too prescriptive at this point in terms of what form they'll take, because it will depend on the three organisations who are successful at the application stage, as to whether those weekly touch-in points will be something that is delivered as a cohort, or whether there'll be more of a need for kind of bespoke support. But there'll be weekly touch-in points alongside your peers and with CSE colleagues to kind of co-design what your plans are, think through what your engagement approach is, what tools and data there might be available that CSE can kind of give you to help you think about what options there will be available in your community, as well as to start to reach out to Bristol City Council colleagues and think about what programmes and schemes the council is starting to develop and where there might be overlaps with what your community priorities and needs are. The next phase, which will run from October to April next year, is the kind of shortlisting and market testing phase. So that's continuing to work on what you understand to be your community needs and priorities, and starting to engage with a broader range of stakeholders to start to turn your ambitions into tangible ideas, if you like. So that might be organisations in the city that have strong retrofit experience or investment experience. There are some great organisations across Bristol who have that strong kind of social investment experience and business development experience. So just trying to link up with those organisations. Then with kind of more detail on your ideas, there's then the idea that you would pitch back your ideas to your communities to ensure that the kind of more detailed project ideas that you've been developing are consistent with what they've said that they need and would like, and whether there are particular preferences in terms of what project ideas are progressed further. So it's a kind of a short listing of potential project ideas. Next slide, please, Amy. And then there's the third and final phase, which is what we've called the project development phase. So that will run from April 2025 to October 25. And this is really about trying to turn your kind of short list of project ideas into actual delivery plans with full business cases, making sure that they're both kind of technically possible, but also financially robust, and that there are kind of investment opportunities to make them a reality. Yeah, also just to make a point in terms of whilst we'll be working with each of the 3 individual communities, this Transforming Energy Together project does sit within a broader Bristol-wide and even kind of regional West of England-wide ambitions. So it's trying to also look at where there are opportunities to align what different communities want at the community level with kind of broader ambitions across the region. So we've said here, you know, looking at whether there might be opportunities to kind of bundle projects. So if one community in one bit of Bristol is very interested in doing a kind of street scale retrofit project, and that's also an ambition for another bit of Bristol, is there an opportunity to kind of bundle those projects together to kind of reduce costs and lever in investment into the area? I think that might be my last slide. I think I'm going to hand back to Amy just to give an overview of what the Bristol Energy Network offer is as part of the project.
Great, thanks so much, Harriet. So just to also share that in terms of this comprehensive programme of support and funding with CSE, there is an additional opportunity of support through Bristol Energy Network and their Energy Academy for the 3 selected communities. That involves having a detailed energy survey for a community asset in your area, up to 10 community energy champions trained and supported to be active in the community, and those champions will also have the opportunity to get energy surveys of their homes and to support with the creation of energy action plans. And yeah, Lucy from Bristol Energy Network will be available in the Q&A if you've got any more questions around that. And then finally, just before we move over to Q&A, just to say a little bit more about the application process. So we've got a 2-stage process, and the reason why we've done that is because we know that capacity, time in community organisations is really, really stretched, and we don't want people to having to do, you know, more than they need to. So we've got this quite light touch first phase initial expression of interest, which includes just giving a short overview of your organisation and your community, short explanation about why you're interested in participating in the Transforming Energy Together programme, some evidence of either a sort of community climate action plan, energy plan, or being able to evidence, as I said, a bit of track record of doing engagement and working with your community to identify some early priorities. A little bit of an overview about how you regularly engage and communicate with your community, because that's going to be obviously really, really important. And then just ensuring that you meet the key eligibility criteria, and just to confirm that you've got sign off from your senior reps within your organisation to apply. So it's quite light touch and should be quite quick to do. And yeah, so we will then go down to the next phase, and I'm just going to go on to the next slide because this helps to sort of give it a little bit of an overview. So the deadline for those initial expressions of interest, as I said, which are quite light touch, is the 21st of March. And what happens then, so that it's a very light investment of time in order to make your initial expression of interest. So then we will do a quick review of what's come in to see what organisations are interested, what kind of questions come up, and then we will invite the eligible organisations to come along for the start of the second stage of the process, which is to come along to a one-to-one surgery session. That will just be a 1 hour online session. And we're offering a bursary of £150 for organisations to be able to come, to be able to prep and come and have that conversation with us. So that's where we can work through in a bit more detail specific ideas or challenges that you might have, but do that in a supportive and collaborative way with ourselves, with CSE, and some input from Bristol Energy Network to sort of help you work up your idea and sort of troubleshoot, do a bit of soundboarding with critical friends to help work it up. And then at those surgery sessions, we will share the kind of fuller expression of interest form. But again, that's not going to be huge. It's just going to be asking a few more detailed questions about your energy priorities and what you'd like to sort of put forward. So there's 3 weeks then between the surgeries and then the deadline for the full expression of interest, which is the 9th of May. Then there'll be a panel of partners that will be reviewing that, and they will be a transparent scoring and assessment criteria for the 3 communities that are selected. And we will announce the 3 communities that have been selected by the middle of May, and then work will begin with the 3 communities from the beginning of June onwards. So that just gives you a rough overview of the process. And I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can finally go see everyone's faces. So we've given you a lot of information there. Now we've got a good chunk of time. We've got about half an hour if we need it to ask for any questions that are coming from you. A reminder again that this is new. Part of the Innovate UK funding that was given to Bristol is to support Bristol to test and develop new ways of working here that can be shared with other places. So as I said, we haven't got all the answers, and part of it will be a bit of co-discovery. But the invitation is now to share. I'm going to just invite Lucy from Bristol Energy Network and Louise from CSE, who are also going to be helping the responding to the questions, to do you want to just quickly introduce yourselves?
Shall I go first? Okay, so I'm Lucy from Bristol Energy Network. So we're obviously supporting Climate Nature and CSE with the Transforming Energy Together programme. We'll be doing all of the sort of assessment work, and we've also got the Energy Academy, which I believe there's a link to in the chat. So yeah, really excited, just sort of helping to network a lot of champions in the area. As Amy says, 10 champions in each area, and we're hoping to do one energy assessment of each community building as well, community building in each community. So yeah, I'll hand over to Louise.
You're on mute, Louise. There was going to be one.
Hi everyone, I'm Louise. I'm here at the Centre for Sustainable Energy. I'll be working quite a bit with you in the action learning phase if you're sort of selected to be taken forward. So great, lovely to meet you all.
Thanks. I'm going to open up the room. I think we're going to say hands up if you've got questions. Reem is also going to be keeping an eye on the chat, because I've seen at least one person, I think their mic isn't working. So if for any reason you can't, then put questions in the chat and we'll be monitoring that and make sure we can get through them all. So we'll kick off with Ruth. Over to you, Ruth.
Remember to unmute. Thank you. Hello everyone. Thank you for that. Really exciting. We're one of the partners that are lucky enough to be producing our community climate action plan, and I think I've taken comfort from the fact that the examples that Harriet spoke to are all listed as priorities. So that's like a real whoa moment for me this morning. So thank you for that. I've just got a couple of questions around both the retrofit and the solar that was mentioned, because those are 2 things that we've already thought of as the farm that we could really support our community with. But I know there's been talk of that's not just one street or individual houses. So I wondered and I appreciate this is totally new and we're all learning together, but what's the kind of minimum expectation, if you like, in terms of the number of streets that you would expect to engage or the number of properties?
Harriet, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and Louise, please add. I think it really obviously depends on the situation and also around the finances. I think the key thing is kind of looking at what financial models really work well for what the ambition is. And I obviously these are kind of community projects that would never be at an individual household level. And the more people that you can get involved, especially in a kind of spatially confined space, it makes the finances work better. I don't think we've actually come up with a minimum threshold, but I'm sure there are people who have more practical experience of these kind of projects who probably on a technically financially feasible level would be able to answer that better than me. But yeah, that is definitely something that we would work with you on the project.
Brilliant.
Iris is saying she can talk about solar. Yeah, there will definitely be people on this call who've had lots of experience exploring, for example, solar projects or
Great. Okay. And then I've got one more. Can I squeeze that in really quickly, just on retrofit? So I know the information pack kind of talks about staffing costs and existing and new. In terms of the retrofit, could we, one of the priorities or actions that's come up in the community action plan is around education and workshops for community members? Is that something that we could look to do with this funding as well? Does it have to be kind of just one thing, or could it be multiple things?
Harriet, do you want to go first? I think what I would just say in addition to that is there could be good connections made. One of the other strands of that, the holistic Bristol Mission Horizon project, is the focus on skills. So there can definitely be some connections with that whole other piece of work, which will bring some resource and partnership working. But
Brilliant.
Harriet, do you want to speak a bit more?
I think I saw Louise unmuting, but yeah, I can definitely.
Oh, and Louise, yeah, respond more to that one.
Yeah, sure, I can come in, seeing as I'm muted. Yeah, so that 100,000 would be for a blend of staff costs and support to engage your community. So the workshops that you mentioned could form an element of your engagement approach. So I think that would be something that during your one-to-one sessions, we could talk to you in a bit more detail about that and work out, how that might all fit together. But yeah, I think the workshops you mentioned definitely could form a part of your engagement approach, which would fall in within that 100,000. So yeah, it definitely can be some staff costs and some engagement costs.
Amazing, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Can I just jump in, Amy, and say from Trevor, we've got a comment in the chat that says, I'm guessing I'd need to look up which local community group may already be interested in my area, which is BS3. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And are there
Trevor.
any good ways to do that?
In terms of linking up with community organisations already in your area, so I don't know if that if you're coming from maybe you're a more energy focused organisation or you're a resident. I think it would depend on what your kind of position is and how you want to link up. If you can email us afterwards. I think we've probably got good knowledge of community organisations across the city, and we could do a bit of matchmaking if that's helpful. Iris, did you want to respond specifically on solar before we go on to Stuart's question, or
yes,
if you can keep it? Yeah,
we'll do it very quickly. So we formed something called Resilience Network, CIC, last year, which some of you know, and what we've been looking at as part of that is how in the future we can be more funding independent, as in funding from the outside, independent as a city. And we've been beavering away trying to figure out how to overcome the technical, the legislative, and all the different sort of contractual issues that are with big solar schemes in an inner city environment as opposed to a farm outside. And we've got quite far with that. So I'm just here to say, whichever the three organisations are, we'd really like to work with them, because we are specifically looking at not council properties, because as mentioned before, that's City Leap's sort of remit in a way, and also housing associations have got their own sort of agendas going forward. But there's all the homeowners, and particularly the neighbourhoods that those anchor organisations are likely to be based in, that finding it really difficult to access solar themselves independently. So we're looking at if you want to call it an urban farm, as opposed to just, in inverted commas, everybody having their own solar put on their roof. But this is still roof-based, domestic roof-based solar. So whoever's interested to talk to us about that, we'd be really keen to share what we've found out and how that might work. And it will work with everybody together much better than it would work on an individual street, or because it's really complicated if you're trying to do more than just put something on a roof. And then there's the retrofitting question that goes with that. So we've been looking into that as well, and we've got some investors behind it. So hopefully we've got a little bit further already. So it'd be a shame if there was no working together. So that'd be silly.
Definitely. Thanks so much for bringing that in, Iris, and thank you for that offer. And we could definitely make that connection. That's great. Thank you so much.
No worries.
I'll go to Stuart next.
Morning. How are you going to be working with tenants? I mean, it almost sounds like you're excluding council tenants and RSL tenants. What about all the private sector? What about private sector living inside council properties? And my second question is, how are you going to measure impact in terms of a just transition?
Great, thanks, Stuart. Well, I mean, I suppose part of the first question is that it will be dependent on the community organisations that will be selected, their particular makeup, and how they particularly decide to go on that engagement journey. Harriet and Louise, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think probably just repeating what you were saying, Amy, in terms of, I mean, if I think about, you know, lots of community anchor organisations across Bristol, their communities will have a whole range of tenures and residents living within that area. So there's no kind of exclusion. Obviously, if you're living in a Bristol City Council tower block, what the options are, you know, for residents in that situation will be different. If you're, you know, living in private rented. So there's no exclusion. It will just be probably, you know, different solutions for different tenures. In terms of the just transition principles, obviously that is very core to the kind of approach that CSE is trying to develop with the 3 communities that are successful, is that kind of continued interrogation of you know, as at each kind of regular touch-in point and as projects are developed, using the framework of just transition principles. And whether that's using, for example, the just transition declaration, or whether it's using something like the equity sequence to just have a kind of continued questioning of the community organisation in terms of making sure that that is a framework that is kind of shaping their ambitions. So yeah.
Can I come back on both of that, because I'm still confused. On the just transition one, I've yet to see any metrics for measuring it, and that's beginning to become a problem for us. The second one is going back to tenants. If you're going to be putting in an expression of interest and you are dealing with tenants of whoever, do you have to have the landlord's permission?
I think because the point of the journey, the point of the 3 phases of the journey is that you are the selected organisations alongside CSE and other partners on the project will be working with you to develop project ideas. So I would say that you don't have to come with the expression of interest having already engaged with every single resident in your community. That's kind of part of the process of the journey. Obviously, there's a big benefit in any engagement that you've already done, which is what Amy's kind of said in terms of we would hope that community organisations that come have already either got a community climate action plan or have done engagement with residents in their area around climate and energy priorities.
And
yeah,
it's not the residents' engagement I'm talking about here, but if you're dealing with somebody's property and they're a tenant, do you have to have the landlord's engagement as well at that stage?
I think if you're trying to develop an energy project around any changes to people's homes, then of course they're a critical stakeholder in terms of the engagement that you have to do when you're looking at the technical and financial feasibility of a project. So the journey would definitely require engagement with all stakeholders that need to give permission for any project to advance.
And just to come back to Stuart on the wider just transition point, so obviously as the City Council is a partner on this, they've made the signed up to the Just Transition Declaration, and they're looking at how that's going to evolve and how that's going to be implemented. It is a key focus of the overall Bristol Mission Net Zero project, and as part of that there's going to be the recruitment coming up soon of an inclusion catalyst who is going to be working within the whole project to kind of champion and interrogate and make sure that just transition remains key. In terms of actual metrics, that's part of the journey that Bristol is still on in terms of defining that, but in terms of the learning and that inclusion catalyst, working out the impact is something that they will be doing when they're in post, specifically looking at just transition.
Okay.
Jack, you had your hand up, but I think it's gone back down. Do you still have a question?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll go for it. Thanks for taking us through all that. I guess I was interested in to what extent we're looking, or you're looking for in the partners, like innovation in the project versus scale of investment opportunity. Like, as in both as individual projects or partners and as a group, are you looking to test new ideas, or are you looking to get things of scale for investment?
Louise and Harriet, do you want to come in on that?
Sure, I don't mind coming in on that one. I think that the focus for Transforming Energy Together is really about projects reflecting community need. We don't necessarily have a focus on innovation, but obviously projects that sort of really reflect community needs, that are also of a kind of investable scale, are probably going to be more likely to be investable at the end of the process. So we're not looking for a particular scale, or we're not necessarily looking for projects that are particularly innovative. It's really about just selecting projects that are really needed in the communities that they're situated in. But when we are later down the line and we're seeking investment, projects that are of a kind of investable scale are more likely to sort of to be financeable. So I guess it's something that we're thinking about, and it's that there are definitely benefits to having innovation as an element of the project, but it's not our core focus, I would say.
And can I just say, just on that, given that this is kind of an Innovate UK project, I would say, from my opinion, the innovation also comes from the whole approach that we're trying to take in this project. Because I think often you have projects which happen at the community scale, and then you have projects which happen at a more strategic scale, whether that's local authority or regional. And I think often there's like a mismatch where there isn't the meeting of those two. And this is, if you like, a kind of journey that we're going on to try and explore how do you actually make that linkage in a way which stays true to the community priorities, but which is kind of resonates with the more strategic opportunity in terms of finance and like larger scale schemes. So I think that's where I see the big innovation coming.
Okay, thank you both of you. That's really clear, and I can see that as an innovative approach overall. Thanks.
Yeah, and as I said, one of the reasons why we've built in this two-stage process and to have those one-to-one surgeries and time and space to do that is because there's something that like it's pinpoint refined, and it provides an opportunity to sort of sit down and in a bespoke way talk through some of their particular points in a supportive way. Have we got, Reem, are there any other questions in the chat? I can't see the chat.
We have got a couple of comments from Iris that might be helpful to read out loud, that I think referred to the question from Stuart earlier, just in case anyone can't see them at the moment. So Iris has said, for clarification, ResNet is working with City Leap to make sure that where there is crossover between tenures and shared buildings, we find solutions that everyone can build on. Our main focus is to try and include private tenants and lower income homeowners, as they are hard to engage. We are looking to engage with tenants and their landlords, and I'm sure the anchor organisations for this programme will do that as well. Any measures affecting the fabric of the building will need landlord engagement. And then one more point from Iris is that ResNet is looking to including communal rather than individual home-based batteries and EV charging points for car club bays, and are working on how they might be able to include these. Yeah, I think that's
Great.
all from the chat. Trevor has added some helpful organisations and links as well right in there.
Thanks, Reem, and thanks, Iris, for sharing all of that useful information. Any other questions? I can see that Annalise unmuted herself.
Hello, yes, I have. I'm kind of looking for my little hand and I'm like, oh, okay. So anyway, thanks. Hello. Thanks for all this. Yeah, it feels like, Iris, thanks for all that information. I just feel like it's a little bit out of context for where we are currently. Is there something you're just giving us to us so that we can kind of think beyond? It's kind of obviously thinking way down when we get to that point, and then we start thinking of planning and, you know, like, okay, so we're planting seeds of potential, essentially, of what's possible. So thanks for that. I just wanted to kind of understand the context of where this comes in, just to add as another partner to consider in terms of community energy generation. I was just interested or curious, because this is so baseline, this initial expression of interest, and then for the next stage, yes, we don't want projects yet. Yes, we're going to have certain priorities or ideas that's emerging currently. Is there the flavor of it, of the three organizations or communities that we're looking to engage? Do you think there's a specific kind of like you know, how they will potentially rate that? Essentially, is it going to be based on actionable, you know, what's the thinking there? Or is it potentially looking at, you know, very varied type of projects? Or yeah, any idea on that potentially?
Yeah, in terms of how we're going to review and select the three communities that are actually participating, yeah, it's a good question, and there's so much breadth of potential organisation and potential project. I think that's why we wanted to have the two-stage process and be able to just sort of hear from people who are, yes, we're interested, yes, we fit the criteria, yes, we've done some engagement, yes, we've got something to build on. Because until we sort of know that scope of who's potentially interested and the kinds of things they might be wanting to take forward, it's quite a challenge to get really specific, because we could do lots of thinking about the specifics, but until you know who's really in the mix and who's really interested, it's quite a challenge to do that. So I think yeah, we're quite open, and we obviously, you know, want to have those conversations at the surgeries to be able to get under the skin of things a little bit more. In terms of, we know that there will be community organisations that have participated in the Community Climate Action Project that are interested and have plans that might want to be part of that. We wanted to make sure that there are potentially organisations who haven't. So within that cohort of 3 community organisations, it would be good if there is some, you know, breadth and diversity. But yeah, I think which might be unhelpful at this stage to not be able to be specific, but we think it's a better way to be responsive to who comes forward initially. Harriet and Louise, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that, yeah, that sums it up well. It's the kind of chicken and egg thing, and I think sometimes it's quite difficult to not be too detailed and prescriptive at this stage, but I think we have to resist that and see it's kind of an evolving thing.
Thanks, that's great. No, I mean, that's yeah, because it's that you have to have had this engagement with the communities beforehand. So this already eliminates loads of communities in areas who can really benefit from this, and because it's geographical as well. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, there's an X amount of people who would have had that deep work within Bristol already. So it's not a massive cohort really. if we think about it in that sense. So yeah, thanks. No, that's all good. Just good to understand. Thank you very much.
I think also, can I just add to that? There's definitely, whilst there will be the 3 community organisations that are chosen, there's definitely an ambition that this whole programme will benefit other communities too, just in terms of, you know, as yet to be defined. But yeah, we recognise that there is a certain threshold that we're putting in place, predominantly due to the fact that it's not a very long time frame, and we need to be realistic about what's possible. And I know from being involved in the Community Climate Action Project that you can spend 18 months just on engaging your community, and we just don't have the time, unfortunately, as part of the time frame of this project. But yeah, we'll always be looking for opportunities for other community organisations that haven't been selected to benefit, because obviously this is kind of a competitive process, which obviously we would much prefer just full collaboration.
And just, I was going to say at the end that there is, so part of the role that Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership has in this is there is a wider kind of like a learning programme. So once the 3 communities are up and running, there is the opportunity, there will be a series of events and workshops of which there is paid time to be able to attend for a wider group of community organisations to come along to build that capacity. Because I think holistically in the city, what we're trying to do through all of this is to develop the capacity and build the pipeline of projects. And that requires activity at lots of different stages, some intense work with some organisations that are kind of pump primed and kind of ready to go because they've done engagement, but to be helping develop that capacity and knowledge and skills and confidence further down. So we will definitely be doing both. And yeah, there are some specific events that will be plugged in, and there will be paid time for other community organisations to be able to come and participate in those. We've probably got Ruth.
Sorry, can I just ask a really it's a silly question, but I'm just going to go with it. I'm amongst friends. So in the final stage, so project delivery, which was April to October 25, I've made a note of turn ideas into delivery plans to ensure technically and financially viable. Is there, so £100,000 is, you can tell I've worked in the charity sector for a long time, £100,000 to little charity organisations or big charity organisations is quite a big chunk of change. What is the expectation or the, I don't know, split in terms of what do you, I'm trying to think how I feed this back to the Wimwell Hill City Farm board, really, and my mind's kind of racing because they're going to go, oh, £100,000, that's marvellous. Not that we've, you know, been selected and we've kind of got to go through the whole process and stuff. But is there, what level of, if £100,000 was spent on engagement and working up the plans and maybe some initial workshops and stuff, is that all? And I say all because it's a big chunk of work. I've done community development for a long time. It takes a lot of time and effort and resource. But is there an expectation for some actual retrofitting to have started with that £100,000, or we go out and we get funding for whatever is successful and the community votes for once we've kind of gone out for that final consultation? Does that make any sense at all, what I'm asking? Yes, good.
It does, absolutely. Harriet, do you want to come back first on that?
Yeah, and Louise, please correct me if I'm wrong. So in terms of the, I can't remember if this was said already. So there's an expectation that that equates to approximately 200 days worth of time. And in terms of like the profiling of it, it would be maybe 40 to 50% of this in the action learning phase. So there's quite a kind of chunk up front.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where like all of the, you know, the engagement and the kind of clarifying of community needs and priorities and where to focus effort. And my understanding is that it's more like it's a development project. So I would say there isn't a necessity for kit to be installed in the period. It's more about building up ideas, developing business cases and the finances to make these things a reality, check they're technically feasible, bring in the partners that are needed to actually make it possible. That's what the expectation is at the end of it, not that you've already done the project. Yeah.
That's absolutely what I'd taken from this session, but I go back to the fact that I've worked in the charity sector for a long time. and often a lot is expected for not very much. So it's fantastic actually that there is this opportunity that community organisations, whether charitable, whether CIC, whatever their governance, are being recognised and supported in a monetary way. So thank you.
Louise, is there anything else you wanted to add, or are we all?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Harriet said. I mean, I suppose this is the purpose of transforming energy together. Is that development phase is the hardest bit to fund, really, to have dedicated time and resource to work on that phase. So absolutely, that's why that is the core focus of this programme. Because it is so difficult to get funding to really focus on it and do it well. So yeah, just that's all I wanted to add.
That's great. Any other last quick questions before we just do a time check? Anything else really quickly burning? But if not, Reem's just put in the chat any clarifications or questions, fire them over to the contact email. I'm just going to then thank you all for your questions, and thank you for bearing with the fact that, you know, as we said, this is in development. We think it's a great opportunity and we're really useful for that capacity building, but we want to keep it, some elements of it, open and responsive. So that means we don't necessarily have all the answers right now, but we hope that that's a really positive thing. So I'm just going to switch back to a couple of finishing slides. So yeah, just a little bit of wrap up then, potentially, in terms of if you are interested, if you think this is something for you. And as I said, that initial expression of interest is very light touch, so it's not time consuming. It's quite open. So make sure you check the criteria within the info pack, and the link's going to go in the chat again for that. Make sure you're eligible. Have a conversation. Initial one, just to check in to make sure you've got outline buy-in from senior staff or your board or your directors, however you're constituted. And then complete the expression of interest, the initial one. There's a Google Doc link going in the chat now. There's also a Word version that you can complete and send over. If you would prefer to do that verbally, then you can do an audio or video response to that. But please, can we ask you that you respond to the same questions and the same length of response that is requested within those forms. So the deadline for that is the 21st of March. As we've said, if you've got any queries in the meantime, please get in touch. So the email there, and we get a lot of mail coming into that. So if you could help us, if you could just put transforming energy together in your email header, just so that we can help filter things. And the other thing is the one-to-one surgeries. We've got time blocked out on the 15th and 16th of April. So it's worth just flagging, just checking your availability around that if you're interested. And it may be that that this opportunity you've come along today and you think, oh, it's not quite for me. If that is the case, we would encourage you and ask you to please do share and circulate it with other organisations, other contacts in your networks who you think it might be a good opportunity for. But there are also a few other broader, wider opportunities if you feel like this isn't quite right for you, or maybe in addition to. So first of all, the Community Climate Action Project, the Learning and Mentoring Programme, is just open for applications for cohort 3. So that's a supported journey for 6 community organisations to co-produce their own community climate action plan. That's that journey that Ruth and Georgia and Jack from Brixton and Annalie are just coming towards the end of. So link going in the chat around that. We're really, for that, trying to encourage and support demographic communities to get involved in that. So again, it might be interesting for you, but please do share that opportunity. There might be that there's specific demographic communities within your geographic community that might benefit from that. There is a wider offer, an opportunity from Bristol Energy Network, so the Energy Academy. So not only is there an opportunity for energy champions amongst the 3 community organisations that are selected for Transforming Energy Together, there is also a wider opportunity to support and train energy champions across the city. So there's a link going in the chat there if you're interested and you'd like to sign up for that. As I mentioned, if you're an organisation who perhaps this Transforming Energy Together isn't completely the right fit, or perhaps you're not one of the 3 community organisations that are selected, there will be this wider programme of events and support with funded time to attend. That'll be from the autumn onwards. If you're interested in that, then please send an email to the contact email address that's going in the chat just to register your interest, so we can just build up a list of people who are interested in that. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware, just a quick flag, that there is in terms of energy projects, the rolling funding programme from Bristol City Leap, their community energy fund. So there's just a link to that going in the chat right now. So that's all from us from today. Thank you very much. I know you're all super busy, so thank you very much for coming along. We hope that's answered some questions. We have recorded this session. I know a couple of people joined late or had to dip out, so we've recorded it and we'll be sharing that over the next day or 2 with you all. So if you need to kind of recap on anything, and yeah, drop us a line if there's anything else you would like to clarify. But otherwise, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we really hope that we'll receive some expressions of interest from some of you amazing community organisations. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all for coming. Take care.